Yo, what's up guys? So we have some official Yu-Gi-Oh rulings for, of course, the newer Yu-Gi-Oh cards that will be coming out into the game, specifically all of the Endymion, the Daybreak Magical Warrior, basically a lot of the new Spellcasters coming out, and of course, that new deck. But anyways, we're here to go over the rulings. If you guys want all of the sources, it will be linked down below, but we've got the translation here, so it kind of helps it out, making things a lot easier. Now, if you guys want to read everything yourself, feel free to go and do so, but I'm going to give you guys a too long didn't read and give you guys some of the rulings that I think that I found more interesting and a lot of things that you guys might not have actually known. But these are official rulings, so they're not really up for debate. I know sometimes people like to say, well, I saw one time on this website, but this is on, of course, the official Konami card database. But anyways, let's go ahead and hop right into it. So there's a lot more than what I'm going to be going over in the video, but I'm just going over what I consider certain things to actually be, I guess, more unknown things, specifically going over Endymion, the Founding Sorcerer Supreme. I'm sure a lot of you guys, in fact, yesterday we just made a video going over him. If you guys haven't seen that, definitely recommend you guys to check it out because this will not be a sleeper deck. This deck actually has a lot of potential here. But anyways, I'm going to read its effect because there's so many steps in this effect that it's going to get crazy here. But anyways, this is a new card, and he is a Pendulum monster, and he has a Pendulum effect that you can remove 6 spell counters from your field to special summon this card from your Pendulum zone. Then destroy cards on the field up to the number of cards you control that you can place a spell counter on, and if you do, place spell counters on this card equal to the number of cards destroyed. You can only use the effect of Endymion, the Founding Sorcerer Supreme, once per turn. Then the monster effect is once per turn when a spell trap or effect is activated. As a quick effect, you can return 1 card you control with spell counters to the hand. If you do, negate the activation. If you do, destroy that card. Then you can place spell counters on this card equal to the number of spell counters that were on the return card. Your opponent cannot target this card with a spell counter with card effects. Also, can't be destroyed by opponent's card effects. Also, when this card with a spell counter is destroyed by battle, you get to add a normal spell from your deck to your hand. Okay, so this effect over here, where you can return a card you control with spell counters to the hand. If you do, you get to negate the activation, destroy that card, then place spell counters on this card equal to the number of spell counters that were on the return card. So, important things. You don't actually have to apply that effect where you can place another spell counter on this card. That is an optional effect you can use itself, and therefore, well, the counters can't be on the card when they are basically in a state where the monster is not on the board face up. But there's a lot of interesting things with the whole spell counters. But to sum it up over here, you can't have a card in your hand and have spell counters. But I think most of you guys already knew about that. But the important part really with that ruling was that you can use itself and not place a spell counter on it. You don't actually need that. Another thing that was quite interesting with it that I was going over is other things that would activate not on the field, because he says whenever anything is activated, you can still negate cards that would be in another zone. And it's kind of interesting. So let me go ahead and kind of explain more with this. So for example, your opponent activates the effect of Blaze Accelerated Reload that sends a volcanic card from their deck to the graveyard. Can you chain the effect of the Founding Sorcerer Supreme? And the answer is the effect of it can be activated not only when a spell or trap card is activated, but also when a spell / trap effect is activated. In this scenario, you can chain the effect of itself to the effect of your opponent's Blaze Accelerated Reload that activates in the graveyard. And let me go ahead and just pull up Blaze Accelerated Reload. So it says the card becomes Tri-Blaze Accelerated while in the spell and trap zone, and then during either player's main phase, you can assign a volcanic card from your hand to the graveyard, and if you draw a card. We're also looking at the other effect over here where it says you can only use this effect with Blaze Accelerated Reload once per turn. During either player's main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard to send a volcanic card from your deck to the graveyard. Okay, so going back to the ruling over here, it says that the Founding Sorcerer Supreme to the effect of your opponent's Blaze Accelerated Reload that activates in the graveyard. When the effect resolves, you return a card with spell counters on it to your hand, and the activation of the Blaze Accelerated Reload is negated. But since Blaze Accelerated Reload cannot be destroyed, you can't place any spell counters on this card. So that is actually pretty cool, or bad, depending on what you're actually playing. But anyways, the other thing that I thought was interesting with this is, for example, if a face-up Endymion, the Founding Sorcerer Supreme, is in your monster zone with a spell counter on it, and then your opponent activates Mind Control, can you chain the effect of itself to Sorcerer Supreme? You can activate the effect of Sorcerer Supreme even if it's the only card in your field with a spell counter on it. But in that case, its effect returns to the hand, and it negates the card effect in activation normally, but afterwards, it's not possible to place spell counters on this card. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Even if it's the only card, you could still utilize it there. But it, again, does not place the spell counters on the card. Another thing that I thought was interesting as far as just the whole spell counter mechanic, if you were to negate one card with Forbidden Chalice, or anything that would negate one specific card, you can still place spell counters on it, and it can still count a card that has the ability to place a spell counter on it, which is quite interesting, because Skill Drain is a little bit different, and we'll get into that because I thought that that was a very interesting ruling. So anyways, they mentioned, let me actually go to specifically the Forbidden Chalice. Okay, so anyways, it's saying that you've got a card with a bunch of spell counters on it, and then you're trying to place spell counters on another card. And it says, in this scenario, although the effects of Mythical Beast Cerberus, which is another card, were negated by Chalice, so they're negating one card, it's still treated as a card with the effect that allows you to have spell counters on it. The cards on your field that can have spell counters on them are Spell Summoned by Endymion, Defending Sorcerer Supreme, Mythical Beast Cerberus, and Magical Citadel Endymion, so you'll destroy up to 3 cards on the field. The question was, like, can you still count a card that would have spell counters on it, even though its effects would be negated? Which is interesting because Skill Drain is kind of different with this. Let me go ahead and go to Skill Drain over here. So it says, Skill Drain is face up on your opponent's board, and then in this situation, can you activate the Pendulum effect of Sorcerer's Endymion? So I'm going to go ahead and go to actually, I believe, what is it, Empress. Keep in mind, some of these TCG/OCG names are a little bit different. Pendulum effect of Empress of Endymion over here has the effect where each time spell card is activated, you get to place a spell counter. When you have 3, you can special summon this card from Pendulum Zone, which obviously at that point is not a monster, so it's not negating the monster effect. But you get to summon a monster from Pendulum and one monster that you can place a spell counter on from your hand. Obviously, you can summon it, but you can't place a spell counter on it. And let me go ahead and just basically read the effect. All right. So, anyways. Even in this scenario, you can activate the Pendulum effect of Empress of Endymion. In that case, to special summon it from your Pendulum Zone and one monster from your hand that you can place spell counters on it normally. But their effects are negated by Skill Drain. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. You still get that other card out, but since they're negated by Skill Drain, they can't even hold spell counters, but they can still count, I guess, as cards that you can place a spell counter on them, but you can't actually place them. If that makes sense. I know it's confusing, but that's just part of Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's why I wanted to make this video, because it's very, very important. Other things that I found pretty interesting had to do with the Magister of Endymion. But anyways, as the effect where you get to place a spell counter on it, and then you can move 3 spell counters, Spell Summon Bolt this card, and another card from your Pendulum Zone, 1 face-up monster, you can place a spell counter on it, and if you do, you get to place a spell counter on them. But I really wanted to go over the effect where you can move 3 spell counters, Spell Summon monster with a spell counter on it from your deck, and then the effect of it when it's in the monster zone is destroyed. This effect can still be applied while it is face down. Also, another thing is if anything would destroy the Pendulum effect when it's trying to resolve over here. So it says you can move 3 spell counters from it and then do the effect where you spell summon this card and another face-up card. If that gets destroyed in any way when you're activating that, if your opponent is doing anything, you will not be able to get out this card. It will just negate itself. It actually specifically uses MST, even though no one uses Mystical Space Typhoon. Here we go. Here's the effect. If Magister of the Endymion has been destroyed while its Pendulum effect resolves, the effect is not applied. No monsters are actually special summoned with that effect. But another thing I wanted to mention with, of course, Magister of Endymion is if it is Book of Moon, you can still apply the effect of it when it is destroyed. However, monsters that are face down will not actually have spell counters. I mentioned that before when it said you can't bounce back a monster that has spell counters, and then if you resummon it, it doesn't just get those spell counters again. Spell counters once the monster is basically anywhere, I would say, from the field, or I guess the Pendulum Zone technically, but there's an exception to it, which I will get into later in this video. Oh my gosh, this video is so complex. Yeah, you can still activate that effect to when it's destroyed in the monster zone, you can place it in your Pendulum Zone, even if it would be hit by something like Bottomless Trap Hole, which says that it destroys a monster, and then if you do banish it, you can still actually just place it in your pendulum zone. That was actually a ruling that applies to a lot of different things, but that has to do with more so pendulums than specifically this, but it was a ruling that I think is kind of interesting because no one really plays Bottomless Trap Hole, let's be honest here, but there's a lot of cards that will say destroy and banish the card, whatever. Anyways, Servant of Endymion, the interesting interaction with this card is that it says that this card with a spell counter can attack directly, and then once per your opponent's turn as a quick effect, you discard a card, place a spell counter on this card, and each card you control that you can place a spell counter on. You can still activate this card's effect, even though this would be the only card that you can place a spell counter on, which again is interesting because the other option is technically an optional effect. Another thing I wanted to mention that was interesting with spell power control is that it allows you to, of course, add an Endymion card. The other effect is optional to place as many spell counters as possible, up to the number of spell power control and spell power grasps you control in your graveyard. You only have one of them per turn. But the question is can you, because it does say you have to basically put the max number in. It says that you can place as many spell counters as possible on cards you control up to the number, which is actually a mandatory requirement. It has to be, like if you happen to have 10 cards or whatever the amount is, you have to put that amount. You cannot do up to any amount that you want. You have to put the max amount. You can, however, put them on different cards. However, there are certain cards that force you to have a max amount, and the question was, what if you can't have that amount? What would actually happen? For example, Break with Magical Warrior. I know this is kind of a potato quality picture, but this is the best quality picture I could find of Breaker. But because certain cards will have a max amount, you can still use the card, even though you have to place the max amount. If a card says the max is 10 and you have to place, let's say 10, you have to place that max amount. You can't choose. But because there's a max amount, you will have to go to that max amount. But you cannot exceed the max amount, even though the card forces you to technically use the max amount of spell counters. I know it's a little bit weird. There's also Daybreak. That's also one of the newer cards here. But there wasn't really anything special with that card specifically that I wanted to go over. Another interesting thing is if something were to have spell counters on it, and you were to special summon it courtesy of the effect of, let's say, Ade's Meteor Burst Dragon, which has the effect of when it's special summoned, you can target one card in your pendulum and just special summon it. The question was specifically using Magical Abductor, which is another card. Each time spell counter spell is activated, you can place spell counters, whatever. But we're really looking at the effect to just special summon a monster that would have those spell counters on it. And going over to let's just use their example specifically. But anyways, it says this ruling is an older one that provides the answer. Thought it would be helpful. But yeah, it is pretty helpful. So if you're special summoning them, it doesn't have to be with Odd Eyes or another card unless it specifically says that you can keep all those counters. So if you special summon the card that's in your pendulum zone, or I think anywhere else, there's not anything that I believe is in the banished. That might be a completely different thing, but you lose the counters anyways. But anyways, if somehow you can hold cards, maybe that would be something that would be new. But if Magical Abductor is special by the effect from the pendulum by the effect of another card, basically all spell counters that were placed on it while it was the pendulum are removed. So that's actually technically bad, but those are the rulings. On each one of these guys, if you guys want to click on source, it will tell you. Again, there are so many things that I think are pretty interesting. They go over Daybreaker, which is the new Link monster. Actually, I should have just pulled up a picture here, but it's this card over here. It's Daybreak. Let me make this bigger. Daybreak, the Splendid Magical Magical Knight. Anyways, he requires 2 spellcasters, and if it's Link Summon, you get to place a spell counter on it. It gains 300 attack for each spell counter on it, and then you can only use each effect of it once per turn. And if a spellcaster monster is special summoned to the zone, this card points you can just place a spell counter on this card. You can remove 2 spell counters from this card, then target 1 card in the field and destroy it. The first effect of it does not target itself when you're placing that spell counter on it. Just as a heads up, it's not really that big of a deal, but it can maybe make a difference. But anyways, it says, while Daybreaker is on the field, if you pendulum summon a Magistrate of Endymion and the Servant of Endymion from my extra deck in this situation, how does the effect of it apply? Even if 2 spellcaster monsters are summoned at the same time, points to the effect of himself only activates once, unfortunately. So that was just something also that could be important. Another thing is a lot of these effects happen simultaneously, which is important. So going back to the Endymion Fanging Sorcerer Supreme, spell summoning it from your Pendulum Zone does not happen simultaneously with destroying cards on the field and placing a spell counter on it. But destroying cards on the field and placing spell counters on this card happens simultaneously. This is really important for any card that would negate like one specific thing. Another thing that I thought was interesting with the simultaneous effects was Empress. The special summon 2 monsters and placing a spell counter on are both simultaneous as well. And returning the targeted cards and placing the spell counters, those are not simultaneous. Again, just welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! Some of these are pretty interesting. And then for Magister over here, special summoning on so both the monsters do have most of the special summoning and then placing the spell counters. Most of those are all simultaneously. But when you do something and then place the spell counters on it, those are not simultaneous. And that's very important for a lot of specific interactions within certain cards. Again, special summoning and placing spell counters. There's a lot of these same ones over and over. But anyways, guys, hopefully these new Yu-Gi-Oh! Rulings help you out and solve some of the confusion and, again, answer some of these interesting questions that a lot of you guys might have had because, well, that's just part of Yu-Gi-Oh! Rulings. But, like I said, there's a lot of these rulings that I did not go over, but most of them are pretty self-explanatory, so I figured most of them I didn't want to go over. I wanted to go over the ones that would be a little bit different and, again, interesting interactions in the game. But anyways, hopefully this video helped you guys out. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I always try to update you guys on some of the new card rulings because obviously that's an important thing to know if you play in Yu-Gi-Oh! Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one. I'm signing out.